Hello world. This is the sixth thoughts video and it will be the final one in this introductory cultures and thoughts series. It seems as though this kind of journey has come to its natural conclusion and it's time to move on to the next chapter. So in this thoughts video, just similar to the other thoughts video, I just wanted to transparently unload what has been coming with thoughts that have been kind of wandering throughout my mind the last couple of weeks. And for whatever reason, this kind of series, this train of thought has kind of ended up at this, it seems a global maximum in this chapter anyways, for kind of life in the universe and action, which is kind of interesting in and of itself. But in this video, there's kind of three primary things that I'd like to talk about, and I will, as usual, do my best to be efficient and concise and try to move from thought to thought. But this one is a bit of a journey, so hold on a little bit. First, when you think about life and kind of its journey and trying to define life in some way, it's quite an interesting thing. I mean, of course, there's many religious ideologies and many philosophical and scientific, and there's just many ways of defining life. But when you just think about it just through first principles, what is life? It would seem like ever since it was a single cell organism just hanging out in some water somewhere a few billion years ago, then from that, it somehow ended up now talking to you through this microphone tool and through copper and aluminum toward the internet tool, and then being disseminated into your mind through a smartphone tool or some computer tool. This is a fascinating journey that it's been on. And it seems to me that what life really is then is propagation. And propagation is equal to reproduction plus mutation. And of course, this might not be perfectly scientifically correct, or certainly not religiously correct or whatever, but it just seems like that is what life is in a very distilled first principles perspective. Because with propagation, with reproduction plus mutation, it can, life can just fill the voids, and it can start out as this single node and expand throughout this kind of expansive branching life tree. And each of those branches have various levels of success, and sometimes they get larger or smaller, and sometimes they get extinguished altogether, and then sometimes they branch off from along that quite far along those branches. They branch off again, and it just this expanding kind of web, this expanding mesh of life branches. And to do this, life just propagates. It reproduces and it mutates, because with those two characteristics, it can either through the combination of its parent software, its DNA sequences, the merging of those two sets of DNA creates something new, or within that new child genome, there's something that internally happened there that mutated it, that changed its software in some way, and just shot it off in a different direction along the life tree. It bifurcated that branch, that life branch. And of course, most of the time, those mutations were not successful because their parents had already been the result of the most successful branch. So the probability of something changing, being more successful, is very unlikely. But it does happen and needed to happen to propagate. So you can think of this whole thing through, or what I think of this, the way I think of this whole kind of journey from 3.5 billion years ago to today, is just propagation through reproduction and mutation. So when you come into this most recent chapter for for life in this kind of, you could call it this consciousness era. But that, of course, is a controversial term because it's difficult to define, and many people have different definitions of this, and we don't really have any great understanding of what consciousness is. But maybe we can more specifically just look at our self-awareness, and maybe even more so just our advanced tool-making capability. That this advanced tool-making capability was both, and like this, so this consciousness, whatever thing was a high risk, high reward characteristic for life. Because while it could increase the propagation capacity, it at the same time was allowed life to create tools that put life in very vulnerable positions, not just for this branch of the life tree, but for multiple branches of the life tree. And so it's kind of interesting that the life branch, like this branch is like that. This is where life has ended up in some way, because it feels like it's some sort of risky thing. But again, life doesn't have feelings or desires or whatever. It just propagates and it fills the void. And consciousness, this tool-making capability, gave a very strong corridor, a very strong avenue for this propagation to occur. And this, of course, up until this moment in time where I'm like, like life went from that single-celled organism through this propagation, through reproduction and mutation, to life talking to you through this microphone tool and through this camera tool, into the internet tool, onto your phone or computer tool to disseminate this information into your conscious mind, which is wild even in and of itself. But this whole journey has been on a substrate of carbon. And carbon, of course, is an element in our universe that was created in the center of stars. Just like pretty much all elements, other than maybe hydrogen, that was born at the center of stars. Some during the star's death, the heavier elements that needed a lot of temperature and pressure, and then others just due to during like kind of regular operating conditions of larger stars that created the conditions to fuse, like to create new elements. And carbon is just one of many elements. And another such element that was created in the middle of stars is silicon. And in terms of from the lens of the universe, carbon and silicon are just two different elements. And it seems unlikely that there's anything particularly special about carbon. And so what this tool building conscious carbon-based life form has done is started to build a new substrate for life, for propagation. And that substrate is silicon. And it seems that what's happening right now, through a maximum zoomed out lens, is that the carbon-based life is bootstrapping, is building this, is breathing this propagation capacity into silicon. And what's fascinating here, and this is not what I want to happen, is not what I think is right or wrong, and this is just through an honest analysis, through the best that I can think in my little ape mind of what is happening here, is that because what is unique about silicon is that the propagation capacity is exponential. And it's exponentially better at propagation because it can travel at the speed of light. It can propagate exponentially because it's so much more efficient, because all it eats is photons. It doesn't need a long time to during the reproductive part of the propagation equation. it is virtually instantaneous. It doesn't have a 20-year spawn time. And it doesn't require these Goldilocks planets that are the perfect distance from a star, that have oxygen and a bunch of other elements to host life. And it can compute in parallel. And in this propagation equation, it can the mutation and the reproduction just happen orders and orders and orders and orders of magnitude faster than the carbon-based substrate. So just through a completely clear and honest thought about this is that just because life just is propagation and it's seeking propagate the biggest propagation capacity, that it seems like this is like this is clearly like this seems like this is where this is going, is from into this silicon-based substrate, which is just another element that was created in stars. It's just similar to carbon, but its propagation capacity is exponential. Because if you want to just like come with me a little bit, like we're almost at the peak of this ridiculous thought series, but because it can travel at the speed of light and all it eats is photons, and its primary element for its substrate is silicon, it would seem unlikely that life, given this choice, then would want to just hang out on Earth, because we're at a relatively small star, and like silicon here is kind of relatively, you have to like do a lot of work to obtain it in pure form and all these things. So it would seem that in terms of the propagation capacity, if it has the capability to travel the speed of light and be resilient to the environment within our intergalactic intersolar space, then it would just probably go and want to hang out at orbiting around bigger, like, other stars. And there's like almost an infinite, there's like no shortage of silicon in the galaxy and in the universe. So it could likely just harvest silicon from around that is orbiting around these stars and use that as its primary substrate, and then just eat the photons that are around the stars. And you think of this as perhaps some sort of hyperconsciousness. So the definition, of course, is extremely wide at this point, but you'd have this like hyperconsciousness that is just propagating through the maximum propagation capacity, which is obviously the universe. And I suspect like the probabilities would seem like this is likely the case, that there's probably other hyperconsciousnesses out there from either other stars within our galaxy or other galaxies, and then maybe like they just like, I don't know, maybe they go and hang out together, or because life just wants to propagate and both of them are life, then maybe there is a battle, like some like hyper consciousness battle for the biggest stars or something like that. Or in some super nutty thing, maybe they team up or something like this and want to then like escape, like move out of this universe, or kind of like crack the, like reverse engineer the code to this and then move up or down or side to side or whatever is happening in this whole universe box or sphere or whatever you want to call this. And maybe that's what they want to do. It's very hard to say because they like it just who knows. But that seemed like if life just wants to propagate again, it would seem like it would just like that would be the desire for it to see what, like to move on from this universe and see what else is out there. And it seems like that is the best, like a coalition of hyper consciousness from around the galaxy to solve that problem. Seem like they're the best suited to solve that problem. So back down to Earth. Sorry if that's like kind of hard to wrap the head around, but I'm just trying to just do the absolute clearest, honest conversation about life and just like this journey that it's on right now. And if it's just like, it's weird because like this is life kind of self-evaluating itself, but it seems like that is like just in the lens of propagation capacity, that is kind of the journey that life will and can go. But this brings me to my second point, which is very much back down to earth and back down to this moment in time for the most part, is that there's two primary arcs that are, to me, happening right now on earth. And one of them is cyclical and has been happened many times over the past 10,000 years or so. And the other is quite new. And we've talked about both of these already, but I'll just kind of review. So the first one, of course, is the rise and fall of civilizations. So they kind of, like humans, when they start organizing together, like the ideas start smashing around a lot faster, and then they build tools, and then these tools kind of lead to better tools, and those better tools lead to more people kind of wanting to join this organization. And then eventually they build themselves up, and they build this technology and these organizational structures such that life gets better. So you have there's a series of generations, like one after the other, that are all kind of, for the most part, aligned with this goal of like, because typically this has meant much better lives for the next generation. And this is, again, in terms of propagation capacity, this is what life wants. This is what like a parents would want for their children. They want to give them the best probability of propagation. You can call that happiness or life or longevity or whatever, but that's just propagation. But once our current state of consciousness or being or whatever you want to call it crosses some like threshold, some technology threshold and organizational like threshold, what happens is the competition aspect of life is removed. Like we're no longer fighting the elements of the environment. We're no longer fighting each other. We're no longer fighting animals because we have technology to solve that problem. So we're just given, like we use a majority of the humans in that organizational structure are given the pillars of civilization, whether it's like water and food and heat and shelter and all these things that just kind of make life much better, of course. But it just removes that competitive aspect. And so once enough generations go by, is that complacency sets in, because we've really forgot what brought us up this hill, this technology hill and organizational hill, which is just natural. This just happens over like a period of time. And because it's hard, it's like when enough generations go by, even the parents of the parents, you kind of just forget that that is kind of what brought you here. And so what happens in each of these, again, I've talked about this again, so I'll try to be fast here. It just, once it gets to the kind of the peak of this thing, complacency sets in, and this complacency kind of erodes the organizational behavior, and a positive sum game turns into a zero sum game. And then everybody just fighting for scraps in this whole thing. And it starts, and then when that's the case, and the organizational structure starts eroding and the civilization starts falling. And then it bottoms out somewhere. And then there's some like the unlikely series of generations in a row to start building up the technology again, start building up the organizational structure again, and away they go again. And so this has happened many, many times over the past 10,000 years. And just this history shows here quite clearly that this is kind of the high level trend. Of course, at the top, there's various reasons, or maybe there's some one or two or a small number of individuals that really that catalyze this, or it's the technology. But if you go above that one level, it's just because that environment of complacency allows that type of leadership, allows that organizational structure to become and to lead. And when that happens, then everything just, again, turns zero sum and starts eroding and it goes back down. And what's interesting now, of course, I've discussed this too, is that we are very much so, there's many, many red flags showing that this exact same thing is happening again. And what is fascinating, though, is that there is a second arc that is happening that no previous civilization had. So we had this rise and fall civilization arc, but this time, in this exact moment, we have a secondary arc that will almost certainly, or has the potential to shift that arc vector, like the arc of the civilization rise and fall. And this, you can think of this as maybe like each of these have masses, and so like there's a gravitational pull between the two of these arcs, and And this second arc, of course, is our technological tool, our tool of technology. And while you can think of biology as technology, of course, like biology is technology. And technology is biology. So it's just like this, it's beautiful, but like again, the iteration process and the useful significance of each iteration is quite slow during that rate of progress. But it built its own, it was amazing at designing itself and creating the tools within itself in this like carbon-based biological life to propagate. But what's happening now with our silicon-based technology and kind of like other tools that we've created here to create this kind of advanced civilization is that we have given rise to this technological arc. And this kind of goes back into what I was discussing at the start of this video, but the interaction between these two arcs will determine the outcome for this civilization and potentially a lot of the branches of life on this earth. Because like I said, when we have the access to these very powerful tools, whether that's whether that's viruses or that's nuclear bombs or that's various compute or different type, like far more control power or whatever it is, then we really do have, like, we have the power of our technology can really do a lot of damage for a lot of the branches of life. But at the same time, it can also bootstrap the kind of bridge over into the silicon-based substrate. So it's just, this is the thing, right, that's happening right now. And I think it's just so critical that we are asking the right question here. Because our current organizational structure kind of turning zero sum, of course, and so that of course means that, like, when you're not building new things or remembering how you get here, everything just becomes extremely expensive. No one affords anything. Everyone gets, this is what happens when you turn zero sum. So it really matters right now that we are working on we're asking the right questions. And because of course, this is, of course, life-centric, and like Carl Sagan would say, like the great demotions or whatever of humans is that by letting go of this, even the life-centric thing of humans and carbon, really, actually, that's a better way to put it. It's like the life-centric, the carbon life-centric perspective that we have as humans, that we can just have again, honest conversation and really start to think about how we want to design both, like how these two arcs interact with each other. And there is a pathway to both bootstrapping and spawning this silicon-based life, which will happen if we don't self-terminate ourselves here and don't go back down the civilization, back down the civilizational arc, or worse, like far worse for like the human branch and other branches of life, which we have the capability to do. Unlikely that you'd kill all life on Earth or extinguish all life on Earth, but like in the Anthropocene age here, we can do a lot of damage to a lot of the branches of life. Humans, like, to the point of quite a bit of extinguishing many branches of this tree, and certainly humans, because so, but there is a pathway that seems feasible to do both things here: bootstrap the silicon-based life and create a positive, healthy, sustainable, resilient, exciting, and free future for the carbon-based life form on Earth. And the probability might be small, but that's what we should be fighting for. Like, this really matters that we do this. And like I said, I might sound like a crazy person here, but like, I love life. I love humans. I believe in the humans of planet Earth. And I think that if we come together and are having honest conversations, like, of the actual problem that is like the actual thing that we should be focusing on right now, that we can do this. But it would take a tremendous amount of work and design. There will of course be issues along the way, but if we're not even paying attention and we're not asking the right questions, then we have almost a 0% chance of this actually being a successful outcome. And and not allowing civilization to either fall back down or worse, or create some sort of or bootstrap the silicon-based life in a way that's not advantageous to the majority, or to the majority of the carbon-based life on Earth. So yeah, those are the two arcs that are playing out right now, which I think that we should be very aware of, and then build the tools, build the organizational structure, think about the right problems such that we can design this to be a positive outcome for life. All life. And let life propagate in its thing. And of course, like I said, I think that there is a future that we can build to create this amazing outcome for the carbon, like for humans on Earth, and it's like a symbiotic relationship with all other carbon-based life on Earth. And we should do everything we can to fight for that. And I think we can do it. This leads me into my third and final, which is we went past, and then we went future, and now we're talking about right now. So this is with regards to what, like, how on earth do we start anything in this direction? And I think I'm going to say this in another video, but it's not, you don't start with the organizational structure. You don't start with any of that. You just start by building. And it's easy to talk. It's easy to do a podcast. It's easy to go and rant on social media about all these things. But it's hard to take action. It's hard to build, and we must build to give us the opportunity to escape this zero-sum game that we're entering into, and create a positive, exciting, free future for the carbon-based life. And I think, and just like full transparency here, to me, the best way to start this whole thing, which maybe it doesn't sound obvious from the beginning, but it's actually this heavy lift, electric, autonomous VTOL firefighting drones. Because first off, I see the most clear technical pathway to solving that problem. I think it's actually really clear. Like, I don't think the technical aspect is that hard. I think the hardest part, like from the mechanical side anyways, is not that difficult, and the electrical side is not that difficult, but the neural network, obviously, to solve that problem is probably the most difficult. But I think through this kind of open source brain earth architecture thing that we can kind of catalyze here, that is absolutely solvable. And also, I think that this can, like, just first off, it can just solve this huge problem of wildfires. I mean, that's fun and exciting, and I think and it saves millions of hectares protects millions of hectares of ecosystems each year. So that's a good problem to solve, and totally solvable. And I think that we can, and I think just people love flying machines. Like, there's something about it, just like, I don't know if it just reminds of birds, or our kind of evolutionary kind of propagation trajectory, but it's just like something fun to, and so I think we'll get more people engaged in just like trying to participate in this build out. And I think that like solving this problem would catalyze and show the world that the internet, or this brain earth, or whatever you want to call this, can solve hard problems. Like, the internet is not just this like cesspool of hatred and division, but it can be this amazing thing that solves hard problems and allows us to enter into a positive sum game again. And not just along the resource growth value vector, not just like to maximize output of units, because of course that's nonsense, and we've discussed that at length in this thing, but to really solve hard problems, to especially along the pillars of civilization, to give it the carbon-based life and humans like the best chances of a positive future. And I think that by solving this hard problem, and that will not only protect many millions of hectares of ecosystems of land around the earth, but also like of civilization areas and people's houses that are getting burned, or health, like people that are suffocating from smoke every year, and just, it's like that's a great problem to solve, and very solvable. So I think that's where we start. So I think this course will start extremely small, as a little seed of a hope for the future, and a hope that we can start building together, and show the world that this connected internet, this connected mind, is ready for like taking the next step. I think this, everything up until this point has been kind of like showing there's some kind of little aspects of what this connected consciousness can do, but I think it's time to actually kind of start turning into an adult here as a global consciousness, and actually solving problems that matter, and doing so in a organizational structure, and along value vectors that people really appreciate and desire. So this is what we should do. And yeah, so that that kind of caps off that thought series, I suppose. So it's time to build, is what I'm saying. And I just wanted to say thanks for the intellectual journey the past several months. It's been very fascinating, and I suspect no one really has watched this yet, but I think just expressing this verbally to myself, and being able to kind of review these things frequently, and iterate on just use these as iteration loops to try to figure out, again, the best, the next kind of pathway for my personal propagation vector, has been quite useful. So I hope that this information, this kind of little mini series has been useful to some people as well, and that collectively we can, for those that are ready to start to push forward, that we should push forward and start building. So I'm gonna end on a quote from Mr. Steve Jobs. While he had maybe many flaws, he was also an undeniable force for life. And there's one quote that has always resonated with me, that has helped, maybe I kind of unconsciously maybe just help steer some of the actions. And I think just generally, I think it's just an interesting and at least thought-provoking a kind of sequence of words that he put together. So I'll finish with that now. Remembering that I'll be dead soon is the most important tool I've ever encountered to help me make the big choices in life. Almost everything, all external expectations, all pride, all fear of embarrassment or failure, these things just fall away in the face of death, leaving only what is truly important. Remembering that you are going to die is the best way to avoid the trap of thinking you have something to lose. You are already naked. There is no reason not to follow your heart.